What would you do if the president's bodyguards had more power than the president himself? And what if one day they decided to kill him, and the next day choose his successor? That's exactly what happened in ancient Rome. Not once, not twice, but dozens of times. The Praetorian Guard was the most feared elite force of the ancient world. Bodyguards, spies, assassins, firefighters, gladiators. They controlled power from the shadows. In this video you'll discover how they went from protectors to executioners of emperors. Welcome to the secret history of the Praetorian Guard. Subscribe, ring the bell, and get ready to see the rawest side of power in Rome. The Roman Empire, with all its legacy, its power, and its glory, was sold to the highest bidder. Year 193 AD. Rome had just witnessed a crime that shook the very foundations of imperial power. Emperor Commodus had been assassinated. Chaos reigned in the palace halls. The legions were far away. The Senate trembled. And then, the Praetorian Guard stepped onto the stage. These soldiers didn't just look for a new emperor. They put the throne up for auction. Literally. Who bids more for the throne of Rome? Shouted the Praetorian prefects. 25,000 sesterces per head. Sold. The winner was Didius Julianus, a wealthy senator who promised to pay each guard member a fortune. Thus, by money and not by merit, he became emperor of the Roman world. But the empire does not forgive weakness or corruption. In just 66 days, Julianus was beheaded. And another general, Septimius Severus, marched on Rome to punish the betrayal. When he entered the city, he did not hesitate for a second. He dissolved the Praetorian Guard, tore down their barracks before their very eyes, and formed a new guard loyal only to him. That day it became clear that the Praetorian Guard was not just a security force. It was power in the shadows. It was the true arbiter of imperial destiny. And so our story begins. The story of the elite group that, in time, came to believe itself more powerful than the very emperors they swore to protect. Before there were emperors, there was the Roman Republic. And before the Praetorians became the guardians of absolute power, they were simply escorts of magistrates. It all began with the praetors, high officials with judicial and military authority. They were respected men, but not invulnerable. In times of war or revolt, their lives were in danger. Thus was born the idea of a personal guard, a small group of soldiers chosen for their loyalty. They had no uniform yet, no permanent barracks, no special privileges. Just one mission, to protect. The term cohors praetoria was used to refer to the detachment that accompanied a general on campaign. It was a mobile, functional unit, without a political face. But the foundations had already been laid. Because in those soldiers, Rome had planted the seed of something much greater. A force that one day would not only protect power, but control it. One of the first to take advantage of that force was Scipio Africanus, the hero of the Second Punic War. His Praetorian cohort followed him like a shadow on every campaign. And with him, they learned more than loyalty. They learned that being close to power is also power. Over time, these small escorts would grow in number, become better trained, better paid, and eventually turn into an official force under a new type of ruler. The Emperor. The year 27 BC marked the official end of the Republic and the beginning of the Empire. And with it, the first emperor was born, Octavian Augustus. But Augustus knew that absolute power required more than just a title. It required security, control, loyalty. And so he transformed the Praetorian cohorts into a permanent, institutional, and strategic force. They would no longer be mere campaign companions. Now they would be the emperor's personal guardians. Augustus reorganized them into 9 cohorts, totaling around 4,500 men. But he did something even smarter. Only 3 cohorts remained active within Rome, while the other 6 were stationed in the surrounding areas. This way, he avoided appearing as a tyrant, but ensured he kept a tight fist over the city. A ruler can be loved. But if he wants to survive, he must be feared. The Praetorians were the only ones authorized to bear arms in the sacred city, where the temples, the Senate, and the Forum stood. No other force could come so close to the heart of power without imperial permission. In just a few years, they went from being an invisible detachment to an elite caste within the Roman state. They enjoyed better conditions than any other soldier. Personal servants, refined clothing, direct contact with the imperial family, and above all, influence. Because if you protected the life of the most powerful man in the world, who could dare to give you orders? Augustus died peacefully in the year 14 AD. And his legacy lived on in many fronts, in his reforms, in his empire, and in the men in white tunics who still patrolled the corridors of the Palatine. The Praetorians. Rome, the capital of the world. A sacred city, where weapons were forbidden, except for them. The Praetorians were the only soldiers authorized to carry a sword within the Pomerium, the spiritual boundary that marked the city. Their presence was not only tolerated, it was desired. The emperor wanted power to be seen, to be felt, and to be feared. But they did not live scattered. They had their stronghold. The Castra Praetoria, the monumental barracks of the Praetorian Guard, was built under Emperor Tiberius on the Quirinal Hill. A true fortress within the city, with walls, towers, training courtyards, and temples dedicated to Mars. It was more than a barracks. It was a physical reminder of who protected and controlled the emperor. There they trained with iron discipline. Hand-to-hand combat drills, pylon throws, squad tactics, and above all, immediate reaction exercises in case of an assassination attempt. Their daily routine was not military in the traditional sense. They had to be impeccable, present, invisible yet always alert. Guard shifts were organized in secrecy, and the emperor himself handed the day's password each morning to the Praetorian prefect. Their uniforms inside the city were discreet. They wore white togas with no visible weaponry, so as not to alarm the people. But outside the walls, they transformed into war machines, with ornate helmets, gleaming shields, and swords at the ready. They were soldiers, but also a symbol. They were the line between the people and the throne, between peace and a coup d'état. And in public ceremonies, their role was clear: to be in plain sight, perfect, unshakable. The image of imperial power embodied in flesh, bronze, and silence. Being a member of the Praetorian Guard did not only mean carrying weapons and protecting the emperor. It also meant being part of the highest-paid elite of the Roman state apparatus. In an empire where most legionaries served for 16 years for modest pay and under harsh living conditions, the Praetorian lived a radically different reality. Their service time was shorter, only 12 years, but what truly stood out was their salary, nearly 3 times that of a regular soldier. In addition to their basic pay, the Praetorians received generous bonuses known as donativa, given directly by the emperor on special occasions such as imperial births, anniversaries, or political victories. And if they ever saved the emperor from a plot or assassination attempt, the reward could equal several years' worth of salary. This made them, without exaggeration, the most coveted soldiers in the Roman world. But the privilege didn't end there. Upon completing their service, Praetorians often received land, property, or pensions that guaranteed them a comfortable old age, something unthinkable for most of the empire's soldiers. It was not uncommon for many to later rise to administrative posts, even within the Senate or as provincial governors, using their record of service close to the throne as political credentials. Becoming a Praetorian was not easy. Candidates had to be between 15 and 32 years old, possess impeccable physical condition, have family backgrounds free of scandal or treason, and above all, enjoy the backing of an influential network in the circles of power. From the reign of Emperor Septimius Severus onward, the process became even stricter. Only soldiers who had already proven their worth in military campaigns could join, ensuring not only their loyalty but also their combat efficiency. In short, belonging to the Praetorian Guard was more than a job, it was a direct investment by the emperor. A corps so valuable and pampered that, over time, it ceased to limit itself to protecting the sovereign and became a key political actor, with enough strength and money to decide the fate of the empire. Over the decades, the Praetorian Guard transformed. From an elite military corps, it became a true political force, a silent but decisive player in imperial affairs. They no longer limited themselves to guarding the emperor, now they spied on him, influenced him, and when they considered him weak or inconvenient, they replaced him without hesitation. The first confirmed major assassination was that of Emperor Caligula. The young Caesar, arrogant and cruel, constantly mocked his Praetorian prefect, Cassius Chaerea, publicly humiliating him. That was enough. In the year 41, the Praetorians sprang into action and stabbed the emperor to death during a celebration. Immediately afterward, they found Claudius, his uncle, hiding behind a curtain. And in an unprecedented act, they took him straight to the barracks and proclaimed him emperor without consulting the Senate. For the first time, a Roman emperor was appointed by the soldiers, not by the senators. From then on, the Praetorian sword hung over every monarch. When Nero lost the favor of the Senate and the people, it was the Praetorian Guard who withdrew their loyalty, leaving him unprotected and forcing him to commit suicide. Shortly afterward, in the year 69, the so-called Year of the Four Emperors, there was a bloody dance in which the Praetorians sided with or against different candidates, depending on who offered the best rewards. But nothing better symbolizes their excessive power than the episode of the auction of the throne. In the year 193, after assassinating Emperor Commodus and eliminating his successor, the Praetorians literally offered the empire to the highest bidder. An elderly senator named Didius Julianus won the bid, promising to pay 25,000 sesterces to each soldier. He was crowned in the barracks, but his reign lasted only 66 days. Septimius Severus, a general loyal to the frontier army, marched on Rome, dissolved the guard, and replaced it with men he trusted. Despite such attempts to limit their influence, the cycle repeated itself again and again. Prefects like Macrinus, after assassinating Caracalla, even seized the throne. Others, like jurists Ulpian and Papinian, tried to give the post a legal focus, but ended up murdered by their own men. Thus, the Praetorian Guard became a living paradox. It was the emperor's shield, and also the dagger that could stab him in the back. Because in Rome, power was not only won with laws or votes, but also with the silent blessing of the best armed men in the city. The Praetorian Guard was not only an elite army or a group of dangerous conspirators. It also carried out much more complex, unexpected, and sometimes contradictory functions. They were the eyes, the hands, and often the shadow of the emperor in the darkest corners of the empire. Officially, part of their duties included ensuring the safety of the emperor and the imperial palace. But in practice, this meant operating as a secret police force with unlimited powers. The Praetorians spied on senators, tailed potential rivals, infiltrated suspicious meetings, and compiled lists of opponents. Dressed in civilian clothes, they blended in with the population. When they detected a threat, they did not hesitate to act. They could imprison without trial, interrogate with brutality, and even discreetly eliminate those who jeopardized the stability of power. They operated with impunity, shielded by the direct authority of the throne. And although their image was one of imposing, austere soldiers, they were also used in public spectacles. During games in the Colosseum, the Circus Maximus, or theaters, the Praetorians controlled crowds, quelled disturbances, and patrolled the stands. But at times, they descended into the arena. Some displayed their skill as improvised gladiators. Others killed wild beasts before the public as an act of imperial propaganda, reminding the people that the power of the Caesar also lived in his soldiers. In times of emergency, the Praetorians even assumed a completely different role, that of firefighters. When Rome burned, as happened so many times, the Praetorians were mobilized to open firebreaks, protect temples, and save sacred structures. One of the most remembered interventions was when they extinguished a fire in the Temple of Vesta, symbol of Rome's purity. With such actions, the emperor not only saved material goods but also gained favor among the people, showing that even his personal guard was at the service of all. These soldiers were, in short, much more than guardians of the throne. They were tools of control, symbols of strength, political operators, actors in the streets, silent enforcers, and even heroes in moments of catastrophe. That is why, more than just a military corps, the Praetorian Guard was a total institution, the living extension of imperial power, in all its aspects. As the 3rd century advanced, the Praetorian Guard's power began to show cracks. They were no longer the disciplined warriors of the time of Augustus or Trajan. Their ranks were riddled with ambition, greed, treachery, and internal struggles for control of the throne. They had reached the pinnacle of power, but also their most fragile point. Emperor Septimius Severus, after the infamous auction of the empire in the year 193, understood that he could not trust the corps that had sold the throne as if it were merchandise. His response was clear: he dissolved the old guard and rebuilt it with soldiers loyal to him, taken directly from his campaign legions. He changed its composition, its leadership, and its culture, injecting authentic military blood and excluding the opportunists of old Rome. However, the cancer was not completely removed. In the following years, the Praetorian prefects continued to be involved in conspiracies, assassinations, and power grabs. Macrinus, prefect under Caracalla, even proclaimed himself emperor after killing his master. But his reign was short, and just as they rose, they fell. Finally, in the year 312, when Emperor Constantine the Great, after facing Maxentius, who had been installed by the Praetorian Guard, in the famous Battle of the Milvian Bridge, decided to end the history of this elite corps. After his victory, Constantine ordered the definitive dissolution of the Guard. He personally witnessed the destruction of the Castra Praetoria, the imposing barracks where empires had been made and unmade for centuries. The roar of fire devouring its walls was not just the end of a fortress, it was the end of an era. An era in which men with swords dictated who sat on the most powerful throne in the world. And although Rome would exist for centuries more, the echo of the Praetorians vanished among the ruins of their own excesses. The history of the Praetorian Guard is one of the most fascinating and darkest in imperial Rome. A corps created to protect the Caesar ended up becoming his greatest threat. Soldiers trained to serve transformed into uncrowned kings, silent judges of imperial destiny. For over 3 centuries, the Praetorians defined the course of the Roman Empire, not with votes, not with laws, but with steel and clandestine alliances. Their existence left an indelible mark. They proved that when an armed group concentrates too much power without oversight, it becomes a political actor, and a threat to the very system it was meant to protect. Their history is woven with shifting loyalties, broken oaths, paid betrayals, and unbridled ambition. But they were also a symbol of Roman complexity, an empire where roles were not divided as in modern times. Where the same men who extinguished fires, fought in the arena, protected the emperor, and spied on the people, could crown or kill an emperor in a matter of hours. The end of the Praetorian Guard was not just a military decision. It was a warning about concentrated power without law. Because in Rome, as in every great empire, dangers did not always come from external enemies. Sometimes, they were incubated in the palace halls, beneath the shining helmet of those sworn to protect. Today, their memory lives on as a historical warning: no armed force should stand above institutions or become judge, executioner, and king. The legacy of the Praetorians is not just a story of the past. It is a mirror that history forces us to look into, again and again. The Praetorian Guard no longer exists. But its legacy remains as an echo of warning in every modern military power. If this story struck you as much as it did us, leave us a comment with your opinion or with the emperor who most surprised you. Give it a like, share this video with your friends, and remember: a people who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. Until the next chapter from the past. See you in the next video.